What's up everyone, and welcome to another Rust electrical tutorial. I'm Austin, and today I'm going to be covering how to use the new door controller in the 2024 update. Now this video is going to supersede the majority of the topics in my previous video on this same subject. So the basics here are obviously we have two new inputs, the open and close input, and then of course we retain the original power in and pass through. And what you'll find is that for the most part, this is not going to break any previous builds that use the old version of the door controller. Examples, including my base lockdown videos, are not affected by this. We just have some added functionality that we're going to kind of play with here later on in the video. So big change though is that the placement is different. You can no longer place it on walls, and it is going to place on a specified location for each door type. And when placing it auto pairs to the door, which this part is great. I mean, this was something that was a real pain before. It doesn't matter if the door is unlocked or locked or has a lock or doesn't have a lock. It will auto pair to the door. If the TC is destroyed by a raider, it will automatically unpair from the door, so it'll stop operating the door. However, once the raider places a new TC, they can simply walk up and just repair it with E on the PC anyway, gaining back its functionality. So pros and cons, so you'll have to think about that. There still is a security issue with these that we'll kind of touch upon down there, at least in a small amount of detail. As far as placement goes, you can place it on both sides of the doors, and just like that. And I also noticed that if you are close enough to the door, you can actually place it through the door. I can't promise you that that will always be the case, but that could be useful in some instances, I guess. But other than that, it still requires 1 Rust watt to operate, no changes there. But the power out, or excuse me, the when powered now, I should say, the line's going to follow it. So the simple way to deal with this, so you don't have lines opening through doors, especially if you're trying to hide them, is to simply just run them in a way that they come from the hinge side of the door like this. And when you open it, it'll just follow the hinge. So that's much cleaner, so you can kind of play around with that, but it is possible still to hide them, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. You'll notice that as I'm opening and closing it, it is staying open. So that's a new functionality. If it receives power for a specified amount of time or less is what it is, and I'll show you that with this timer, it will just toggle the door open and close on its own. So that's going to be very, very useful to a lot of you. If you are wanting it to just cycle open and closed, you can still do that. It's just that it's the time associated with it is what matters. So if I hook this up to this timer, currently the timer is set to 1 second to mimic this button, operates just like the button. But if I were to change the timer to, 1.4 seemed to work, but 1.5 for sure, or longer in duration, it now treats it like it's losing power and will cycle. So you can have this open for a certain amount of time, and then it will automatically close. But anything, say 1.3 or less, and it's going to operate like the button was operating it. So you can play around with that. It's very, very simple. Just anything over 1.5 or greater. 1.4 works most of the time, but for sure 1.5 or greater, it will operate as if it's losing power. And so that's another point, is that they still work the same as they used to, in that if they have constant power and then lose it, they will cycle the doors closed again, which we'll kind of talk about down there. And then the last part of the basics is that the side inputs here do not work without power to the door controller itself. So it won't open with the open input without power coming over, some kind of power applied to the door controller itself. So just be aware of that if you're going to use these side inputs. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to cover real quick is just placement. Obviously, we've already looked at placement on the standard door, just like this. Just remember, you can place it on both sides. The double doors, they have their own specified spot, and same thing, just wired up along the hinge if you want it to look nice. No big deal there. The garage doors are placed right here beneath the lock. And note that from the inside, you cannot see it from the side that it's on. So you can hide them. Just be aware of what side you want it to be on. And we're going to talk about hiding them here just real quick, just down there before we move on there. And then for the ladder hatch doors, they are placeable on both sides as well. So if you could place it on that if I didn't have something on the bottom side already. Then same thing, I just simply ran the wire along to the hinge side so that when it opens, you can see that it just sort of follows the hinge there, which is just kind of nice if that's something that you like. And all these behaviors, if you want it to open and then shut, again, just use a timer at 1.4 or 5 or greater, and it'll do a cycle. Same thing with the triangle hatch, no different there. Just ran it along the hinge so that it looked nice. You can do it on both sides. And that's pretty much it for placement. So the next thing we're going to do is just kind of look at some examples. I'm going to play with those new inputs and so forth, and show you like a real simple, quick base lockdown circuit idea, just to show you how you can use those side inputs if you want to use them instead of the classic just power in, power out like my other videos do. And so just here, I've got some branches down here. These are just placeholders to hold the wire so that I can unhook the wire from them. So these don't do anything. They're just there to kind of unhook things. And then over here, I have a power system running here. I've got 3 running into this, and then each of these going to each door controller. Obviously, you can daisy chain these. I just chose to do this because it's easier for me to route the wires for this video, but I could have just as easily, instead of here, I could have run into here, and then from the pass-through, I could have run the pass-through to the power in of this one, and I could have run this one's pass-through to the power in of that one. You can totally do that. There's sort of pros and cons to each depending on what your application is. But in general, just to kind of show how this works, I have power going to each one, so they each have one rust rod arriving. And if I were to shut this, or I'm sorry, if I were to cut power to that, they're going to close. And so that's a functionality that the old door controllers had, and so that still remains. If they have constant power like they do now, and they lose that power for whatever reason, they will cycle back closed again. So if you have that going, and you have, say, in your base, you've got some of the doors are closed and some of them are open. This is based on how one of my base lockdown videos work, and you lose power, it'll shut just that one door and remain closed. So no change there. That is the same. And then just to prove a point here, right here, if I were to run power to, say, the close input on this one here, noting that it does have power, it will close the door using that side input. It needs 1 rust watt, and it will only do so. So repeated attempts will just keep it closed. If I were to switch this up to the open side, it will then open it as it is designed to do. And then note, of course, that if I don't have power, just to like run that home, if I were to run this to the open input on this door controller without power arriving and try and use this, it will not function. So the side inputs, again, do require power present in order to function. And that's the same with any of them. If I were to, and that's really pretty much it. I mean, that's just kind of the basic mechanics that you need to understand as far as operating them, just how their inputs and outputs are working. If I were to connect these to the close, so I'm going to go over here, I'm just going to unclip these wires and connect them to the close. I'm going to show you guys, how this can work with there we go, with a quick base lockdown idea. Again, remember, we've got power. This requires them to have power arriving in order for you to use it in this function. So, notice when I had this up before, if they lose power, it automatically closes. So that is a quick and dirty way just to have a base lockdown. But if you want something more specific, this is a really, really simple idea that has a button and an HPHF sensor. It's currently set to recognize me so that it'll work. You would, of course, switch it to unauthorized players only. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to set it to authorized players so it sees me. I'm currently invisible as an admin. So all I've done here is, just real quick, I've got 8 rust watts coming out of this branch out, going to this branch here. This one's daisy chained to this one. This branch is set to 3, and this branch is set to 3 also. And one of these is going to the button, so it passes through to this OR switch right here. The power out of that OR switch is running to this daisy chain series of branches. Each one of these is set to 1. This could have easily been a splitter. I just did that just to show you the differences. And then each of these outputs are what are running to the close input on the side of that door controller. And so this is just a 2-sided option where if you're in the base and you want to lock it down, you can simply hit this button and it's going to send all that signals out there. It's going to shut all the doors. There you go. It only functions as a close. Same idea on the other side here. That's what this is running to. So this output here is running to this input A side, doesn't matter. And then this is coming out to the input B on this OR switch. And then this output here, the power out here, is running to the input here. Its output is running to the input B. This is required because we can only assume one player will trigger this, and it won't have enough players to pass enough rust watts. And so since we need 3, you have to do this little setup here, and then that's it. So if I were to make myself visible, it detects me and it shuts the door on this side. So we're just running off of this side here, whereas the button is running off of this side here. That's all we're doing here. Very, very simple. But so this all works just fine. But as let me make myself invisible again. As a test here, if I were to, well, I guess I should not have done that. Let me open this back up. If I don't have power in this scenario, so now I've got this thing set up here, right? But I don't have any power arriving at the door controller. This does not work because the door controllers themselves are not powered. It can detect me, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work because the door controllers don't have any power. So in order for this to function, you must have power at the door controllers, or none of this will work. So that's kind of that toss up as between, how do you want to operate this? Completely depends on the type of setup you have. But remember that, if you don't want something like this, you can have a system that is based on the fact that they simply have power, and then when they lose power, they will close, which multiple versions of my door controller videos do exactly that. So now you have multiple options. Obviously, these inputs give you, just greater control over what it is you want to do when and where. If I have a button connected to one, you can open stuff up for a particular person who's, coming or arriving or whatever. And then if it's, you could have an automatic shutdown and then open just one single door. So that, the possibilities are pretty limitless. There's a lot more functionality, and I would say overall, I think that these new updates were really, really great. So the last thing I'm gonna do is I built a really quick trap base here. It's not the purpose of this is not how to build a trap base, but it's to show you that you can still hide the wires. I've got door controllers on both these doors, but in this case, I've got the door controller on this backside here. I've carefully ran the wire and connected it to the hinge over here so that when it does open, it's not pulling through any walls. Same thing on this door here. I've got the wire running behind these two furnaces, and behind this workbench, I've got a decoy light coming down just, to explain why maybe I have this this solar panel on the roof, whatever. It's not about the door panel or the actual build. It's about the fact that you can hide it. And so down here, I simply have if we get down beneath here, just in this little crevice, you can see I've got a floor switch here, got a pressure plate here. And so it works very simply. I would just simply, if I'm not invisible, walk in, hit the thing, it opens the doors. I would get blasted right here, whatever. There's the reset. The point is not how this works. The point is that you can still hide everything. You just have to be a bit more clever. And so now I have this on, specifically built onto this side of the door in here versus this side of the door. So you can still set up trap bases. You can still create things where people have no idea that things are, that they're walking into a trap or whatever. And this also brings up another point, is that I talked about security down here. And that's I talked about how over here you've got a door controller on this outside, and if you were to lose the TC, it unpairs, but if they put their own TC down, they can just walk up and repair this. And so on that logic, what you're going to want to think about is if you have door controllers in your base, think about what side they're on. So if this is a room, if this is a loot room, and you have a door controller on it based on a, say, total base lockdown, just make sure that the door controller is on the inside of the door so that they can't just easily pair it, or know it's there or recognize that it's there or whatever, and easily pair it just to open the door by bypassing your lock. You can force them to blow the door by thinking about what side you place these on, such that if this is a terminal room, just don't put any door controllers on the outside that they can then pair up once they've gotten to your core and stolen your base. So just kind of some food for thought there. So that, folks, is just about all I've got. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. Otherwise, you can get me on my Discord. See you later.